We all know that the difference between a regular student ministry and an outstanding student ministry is our volunteer team. So the big question is, how do we build an Oikocentric student ministry volunteer team? Today in this seminar, I'm going to talk to you and give you 3 steps to building that team, as well as 1 tool that was created specifically to help your volunteers engage with the Oikos principle with their students. I'm really excited to be able to talk to you about volunteers today. We all know how important our volunteer teams are to our ministries. Whether you're full-time or part-time or bivocational, there is no way that we would be able to accomplish the things that we want to without our volunteers investing in our students. So as we start out today, I want to start with a question. What do you value or appreciate most about your volunteers? Think about that for a moment. Think about all of the volunteers that you've had. What do you value or appreciate about them? As I think about that, the first thing that comes to my mind is their time commitment. Most of our volunteers have full-time jobs or families and other responsibilities, and they are committing so much time to our ministries. They show up week after week with such consistency, which is another great thing that I value about them. Another thing that is amazing is not everyone is willing to walk into a room of junior high or high school students and hang out with them. It can be really scary and unnerving to be the one that students are looking to answer questions. And so I appreciate that our students are willing to trust us and trust that God is calling them to serving with students. And lastly, the most amazing thing to me is the commitment that these volunteers have for their students. They show up at our midweek and our weekend programs, and they hang out with the students, and then they call and they text them throughout the week to check up on them, and they go to sports games and plays, and the commitment that they have shows the students so much about who God is and how he loves them. So I'm going to jump into 3 steps to building Oikocentric volunteer teams. Not all of these will be related specifically to Oikos, because it is important in all ways to recruit and do these things that we're doing well. They're not all specific to Oikos, but they are dynamic to the Oikos principle. So you might have heard some of these things. Some of these things might be fairly universal, but they are very important to creating an Oikocentric student ministry. Because if we want our student ministry to be Oikocentric, then we need to be Oikocentric, and our volunteers also need to be Oikocentric. The other thing I want to just briefly touch on is that we all come from very different contexts. Even here at HDC, we have 4 different campuses, and we have 4 different youth ministry teams, and they are all different. We have different students, we have different resources, but as we were talking about how to build an Oikocentric team, these things that we came up with were true across all of our contexts. They were all different, but these principles are really important to all of them. So the first one is that we need to recruit well. As we get volunteers, we want to make sure that we are, number 1, getting the right kind of volunteer, and that we are investing in them so that we can build them up and encourage them and keep them. So we want to start out with recruitment. And the first thing that I want to talk about with recruitment is that vision is more important than need. Now, I want to make sure that you're not hearing me say that need is not important. We all have needs. Each week, we have students coming to our campuses, showing up, and they need guidance, and they need leaders, and they need adults around to hang out with them. There is a real need, and that is very true. But we need to make sure that we're not recruiting based on that need. Think about a ship. If you had a ship with a bunch of holes in it, You could just get a bunch of people to come and plug the holes. You would be able to keep that ship up. But if we want to move forward, we can't just be looking for people to plug the holes. We need people to come alongside and raise the sails with us. If we're just plugging holes, we're not going to move forward. We're not going to be effective in sailing the boat. So if we are ignoring the fact that our vision needs to match with our volunteers, then what happens when there is no longer a need? If that volunteer is there only because there was a need for them and they don't have the same vision, then how do we effectively move forward? We focus on oikos and the oikos principle, and if our leaders are not bought into that, then they will not effectively lead our students. The second thing with recruitment is to offer varying on-ramps and opportunities. I'll talk a lot about small groups today, and that is the system that we use here at HDC, but your system might look different. But regardless of the fact that most of our leaders are small group leaders, we have other adults who are around to offer different jobs and fill different roles for us. When our campuses are all meeting together, we need a lot of people around just to hang out and be willing to say hi and welcome students as they come on our campus. Not everyone feels super comfortable leading a small group, and not everyone should. But if there is a person who wants to join our team, we try to have different jobs around so that they can join in and hang out with students. Because ultimately, the more adults that we can have investing in students, the better. And the last thing with recruitment is that we need to clearly communicate expectations. All of us on our different campuses have expectations, and we have a handbook that we give all of our leaders that are coming in and they're interested in joining our team. We want to make sure that from the beginning, those leaders or those potential leaders know what we expect of them. We do this for a few reasons. One is we want to make sure that they are matching with our vision, as I said before. And one way to do that is to lay out all of the expectations and make sure that they are clearly communicated to them. The second is, as we progress and they become volunteers, if things begin to go wrong and we have to correct them, it's really hard to have that corrective conversation if you didn't lay out what you expected from them in the beginning. It's much harder to back up and say, actually, this is what we expected of you, when you didn't say it right up front. So in the recruitment process, we make sure to spend time letting them know exactly what we expect from them, the time commitment, what we expect them to do in their daily lives, things like that. So the next step to building an Oikocentric student ministry team is to invest well. So as you may recognize, investment is part of the 5 steps of the Oikos principle. And because we want our student ministries to be oikocentric, it's really important to invest in our leaders. And this is why. We want all of our students to be engaging with their lists and investing in their oikos. And if we want them to invest in their oikos, it's really helpful if we have someone modeling how to do that by investing in them. And in order for our leaders to be able to invest in our students, we want to model that by investing in them. So it's super important to invest in our volunteers. So there are 3 things that we make sure to do to invest well in our volunteers. The first is to communicate. It's really easy to get wrapped up in the fact that I'm going to meetings and I'm hearing all of these things and I'm planning and outlining curriculum and it's so entrenched in my life that sometimes I forget that my volunteers don't necessarily have all of the details, and I need to make sure to communicate with them as well as possible. So spending time finding ways to communicate with your leaders is super important. we have discovered that there's really not one way that is the best way to communicate with everyone. So we try to communicate in a few different ways to make sure that we are able to reach our whole team. If you have a smaller context and a smaller team, then it might be just simply having a group text. For our team, it's a little big, and so when we do that, there's constant notifications going off, so that hasn't been the best way for us. But we make sure to send emails weekly to connect with our leaders. But some leaders are not the best at email, don't love that form of communication. So we have also implemented other things. There is a app called Slack that we have used. We've added all of our leaders to that. It allows for different channels and different topics that the leaders can then connect to. They can get notifications if they want to or turn them off if it's too much. And those things have allowed us to communicate well with our leaders. Another thing that we make sure to do is make sure that they have our phone numbers and our personal cell numbers so that if they ever need us, if they need to contact us, they have the ability to do that. Because I'm not always sitting at my desk. It's not always easy to get a hold of me at the church campus, but my phone is usually not far. So we make sure that they have ways to communicate with us, and we try to communicate well with them. The second way to invest in our leaders is to encourage them. Now, this first idea is going to sound really silly and really basic, but I have found that it is one of the best ways to help your leaders know how much you appreciate them. It's really simple. You get a card or a piece of paper and you write a handwritten note. It doesn't matter who you are, you like to receive a handwritten, personalized note, especially when it comes in an envelope with a stamp on it in the mail, because it's just so rare. Sending a text is good too, but there's nothing that can replace spending time and writing out why you appreciate your volunteer and encouraging them and how you see their students growing and how they're investing in them. It is super, super helpful to just write a note. Around here at HGC, camp is a really big deal. And we have spent a lot of time figuring out how to encourage our leaders at something like summer camp. Summer camp is a huge time commitment. They are spending 6 days with smelly junior high boys in a cabin, and they don't want to shower, and it's exhausting. And so we want to make sure that we are encouraging them well. So what we have done is, as we are gathering those camp counselors, as we're recruiting them, we ask them simple questions. What is your favorite drink? What is your favorite snack? And it's funny how they always forget that we ask that. When we get up to camp, we make sure that we have compiled that list and we've spent time gathering all of those things that are personalized to them, things that they specifically asked for. And on a Wednesday, we will randomly drop that on their bunk. You would not believe how excited someone is to get Coke and Oreos. And they always are like, how did you know? Well, you told us. So it's simple. Ask them what they like and encourage them with that. And the last thing is to support them. Now, we're going to talk more about training in a moment, and that is one way to support them. We need to make sure that we're supporting them also with the oikos principle, because as they are learning about it, as they are beginning to implement this into their own life, they could use the support. But the other way we support them is in their personal lives. As we're investing in them, we are spending time making sure that we know what's going on in their life. We are asking them how we can pray for them. We are asking them how the people on their oikos card are doing. So we want to make sure to support them in our ministry, but also in their personal life. Both of those are very important. And finally, our third step is to train well. We want to make sure that we are training our volunteers as well as we possibly can. As we are recruiting leaders, I think the thing we hear the most is, I don't think I can do that. I can't lead a group of 10th grade girls. I can't open up the Bible and talk to them about what God says. Like, it's terrifying. And so we want to make sure that we are training them as best we can. So we do that in a few ways. The first is that we try to have at least two volunteers as small group leaders in one group. And when we do that, we would like to pair an experienced leader with a new leader. By doing that, we are able to, number one, encourage our leaders who have come through and have been around on our teams a while and they know what they're doing, and allow them to invest in another leader. But as a new leader, it's so helpful and encouraging and comforting to know that there's someone else in the room who's been there before, who knows what they're doing. And so we like to pair new and experienced leaders together. The second thing is to train your leaders throughout the year. All of us on our campuses, we all offer trainings at the beginning of the year. And that's super important. We make sure to do that every year. Sometimes it looks different. Sometimes the topics are different as we learn and grow and figure out what our volunteers need. But that does not take the place of training throughout the entire year. Often we will ask our leaders what things they would like to hear, what things they think they need to work on, so that we are able to train them in ways that are helpful to them in the moment. So from year to year, our trainings that happen throughout the year could change. One thing that doesn't change is we are constantly training on the Oikos principle, and with the tool that I will show you in a little while, we make sure to hit that over and over and over again because it is so important to our Oikocentric student ministry. And lastly, we want to support Oikos within the curriculum. So here at HDC, we write all of our own curriculum. We do all of our own messages and all of our own small group curriculum. And while we're doing that, we need to make sure to point out where Oikos is within whatever we're learning. Now, I don't mean that you force it in, but as you're reading, as you're studying, as you're planning and writing the curriculum, we pull it out, we make sure to point it out and have it come to the front of whatever we're doing. Now, if you have a curriculum that you use, I don't think there's any reason why you need to stop doing that. There was a time where we were purchasing curriculum and using that, and it is the same process. As you're going through and you're studying and you're learning and you're molding it to be your own, making sure that you point those things out for your leaders is super important. Some leaders will naturally grab onto this and be able to do it on their own, but some will struggle with it. And so as we are working with the curriculum and the material, we need to make sure that we're pointing that out for them. Now, the last thing that we are going to talk about today is specifically a tool that we created to train and help our leaders engage with the Oikos principle. So on your screen, you are going to see our Oikos Student Volunteer Connect card. There are two sides to this card, so we're going to look at the first side right now. And this side, it looks kind of like a roster. And we have that tool for our leaders to be able to identify where your students are to better invest in them. So on this card, what we ask our leaders to do is they are to write down all of the names of the students in their small group. So at the beginning of each year, they get students, and as they come, there's lots of lines they can add on to those. And so we have them write it down. The second thing is there are a place for the leader to mark where our students are at. So on our Oikos card, both the student and the adult card, there are 4 different categories that we write our names in. And these 4 categories are what we want to identify where our students are. Now, our students in our small group, they're not our Oikos. Your small group is not your Oikos. But what I'm saying is everybody fits into one of these categories. So as we are just identifying where our students are, it helps us to invest in them, to know maybe how to tailor the questions. If we have a group that has a lot of pre-Christians in it, maybe the focus of the curriculum will be different than a group that has a bunch of purposefuls in it. So the leader will write down the student's name and decide if they are pre-Christian, prodigal, purposeful, or potential. Now, potential is a weird category, but we have it there because even in the middle of the school year, we are constantly adding students. And so as you add a student to your small group, you might not know them at all. And so you can select potential before you know which category they're really in because you don't know them very well yet. The other thing I want to point out with this tool is that it's meant to change. We don't intend our leaders to have one card that lasts the entire year. But we want this to constantly be changing as the students are changing. And so we try to make sure that the leaders know this is not a permanent thing. It's okay to use one and then get a new one when you have new students or when you have students that have changed where they are. We want this tool to be helpful to invest in our students. The second line, so in each box there is a line for the student's name, and below that it says Oikoconnect. And that line is there because of the tool we will use on the other side. So as we flip the card over, we will see that the second side is the process that we use to help our leaders facilitate small groups Oikoconnect time. So this is a specific thing that we do with all of our small groups. It's how the small groups start out the night. They will go through this activity with their students to help them engage with the Oikos card. So all of our students are given a card and they are encouraged to write down all of the people in their Oikos and have that with them at every small group. And then as we start out the night, they pull those cards out and they go through this activity. So there are 3 steps to this activity. The first step is to contemplate. So we have the leader have the students pull out their cards and we ask them, who on your Oikos card is on your heart? We want them to think about that, pick out one person on their card who's just been drawn to the front for whatever reason. It could be a good reason, it could be a bad reason, it could be that this person is a potential and they're new and they just met them and they keep coming up. There could be all sorts of reasons. So we want them to contemplate and then share with the group who the person is. Step 2 is to collaborate. So our students then, the leader will ask them after the student has shared, the second step is to ask the entire group, how can this student impact the person on their card's life? So we want to look at specifically the steps of the Oikos principle. So the first one is list. We're going to ignore that because all of them have already listed their Oikos. But we have pray, invest, invite, and prepare. So of those 4 steps, how can one of them be used to impact the Oikoconnect's life? So as the student has shared why this person is coming up, why they are thinking about them, why they're constantly being brought to their minds, the question is, which of these steps can help them? Maybe the student just needs to pray for them. Maybe that's all that they can do. Maybe they need to invest in them. Maybe the relationship needs more investment, and so the student needs to invest. Maybe they need to invite them to an event that is happening at your church or with your youth group. Or maybe they need to prepare themselves to be able to answer that person's questions. There's all sorts of things that could happen. So the question to the group is, which of these should student A focus on and have them share that with their group? The third step is to create. So the final step is, after everyone is shared, we turn back to our original student and we say, okay, what did you hear? What is one action step that you're going to take this week? One thing that you're actually going to do to impact that person on your Oikos card this week. And as our students and our leaders are going through this activity, they are engaging with their Oikos card. They're not just shoving it in the back of their Bible and forgetting about it. But they're getting it out and they're looking at it and they're thinking about the people on their list and how they can impact them, how they can pray for them, invest in them, invite them, and prepare. And so that is a tool that we have used. And as we created it and have used it over some time, we have changed it. So this might not be something that you use exactly as it is here, but we want to make sure that we are giving our volunteers tools so that they can actually engage with the Oikos principle with our students. So thank you so much for joining me today and talking about volunteers. We know how important volunteers are, and we want to make sure that we are recruiting them well, we are investing in them well, and we are training them well. So if you have any questions, we would love to hear from you. So go ahead and reach out to our student team. We want to help you in any way that we can. Thanks so much for coming today.